Welcome to this, the third session of A Year of Living Generously in the Diocese of California. This is our fourth Thursday stewardship series. And there are a small group of us this evening talking about the power of our money. We've been going all year through the motivations of giving, a little bit about why and how we give. Just to recap what we did last time, we talked about our motivations and what it's like to be a joyful giver. We talked a little bit about how it feels to, in our stewardship and our thinking about how we pitch our stewardship to our congregations, how we want to make sure that we're talking about our faith before our budget, and talking about our mission, what we're accomplishing, what our impact is, and always exploring how God uses us to meet the needs of the world. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the power of our money. And we started this conversation briefly before I hit record. We're going to continue it as the session progresses. But we really want to know that money's in our lives. It's here. It's a part of who we are. We are participants in this economy. But we can make choices about that. Some of our choices are better than others. Some of our choices are really hard to make. And so as we do that, how do the values that we have as people of faith impact the choices that we make and how we spend, save, invest, and give away our money? So we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. I'm going to share a few screens that talk about some different models, and then I'm going to bring us into conversation where we can actually explore that. So bear with me while I do a little bit of teaching. With such a small group, we're not going to spend too much time doing that part, and we'll spend more time talking to each other. But let me get through a couple of points here. Our choices matter. And so there's no right way or no right answer when it comes to making decisions, but there are some ethical concerns that we need to think about. And our choices all have impact. We need to think about what we're doing when we are spending or saving or sending our dollars out into the economy. How does that impact the working conditions of people who are making the products or delivering the products to us? What are the human rights and rights to organize that go along with that? What's our stuff made of? Is it being reused and recycled, or is it coming from virgin timber and raw petroleum and newly mined resources? We have to think about that and know where our raw materials come from. And then what are the foreign policy implications? Not just our foreign debt, but how is our government, how is our military involved in making some of these trade relationships secure? How are we a part of that? This is not to say that we are wrong for participating in our economy. It's just to say that an awareness of it helps us make choices when it comes down to it. All right. When we invest and save our money, we are also making choices. And so we need to think about what our bank's policies are. Again, I'm going through a whole lot quickly, and we'll come back around later in some conversation. So what are the policies of our banks when it comes to our money? We give it to them, they don't put it in their vault, they send it back out into various mechanisms to make money. So what are their mortgage practices? Do they have any sort of predatory lending in their past or their present? Do they have a legacy of racism or redlining in their mortgage or their banking principles? And what about our mutual funds and our other investments? Where are our 401ks and our 403bs and our Roth IRAs invested? Are they invested in things that might be engaged in the military industrial complex? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We do have a military. We understand why it exists. But we should know where our money is going and how it's being invested. And if we want to participate in that, do the companies that we are funding through our investments, are they involved? Do they represent our values? And do they represent products and the marketplace that we want to see? And also our giving. This is the one that we don't always think about because, of course, it's a good thing to donate our money, right? We want to make donations, and we're in our churches certainly want our members to be generous and to give. But as we think about the charitable organizations that we represent, when they're not our churches, what are the policies of the nonprofits that we might put on our list of charitable contributions? How are they involved in advocacy? Do they do any sort of lobbying? Do they have a 501c4, which is the sort of political action part of their money, their organization? Is any of your money going to that? How do they manage their endowment if they have one? Are they investing it in things that are socially responsible? Does that matter to you? What is their ratio of overhead to program? So are they paying their executives millions of dollars and only putting a little bit of the money you give into direct service? Or is a majority of the money you give being spent on the issue or value or cause that you're sending your money to? It's a great thing to be generous and to make donations to charity. It's even better when we know what the charity is doing with that money. And how about the board of directors? We call people to serve on boards because they are members of industry, that maybe they're successful in our local businesses, but do they represent our constituents or the values or the causes? Do they work for companies that might be against our values? I worked once for a homeless services company here in San Francisco, and we were providing housing for homeless families, and we had a member of the board who was employed in the mortgage division at Wells Fargo, and we had to ask some questions. You contributed to a big problem that we're having right now. This was in 2006 and 2008. You participated in something that's caused great harm to the housing industry. Here we are in the business of housing people. And how do we work together with you on that? How do we help you with that? So knowing where our board members come from is also an important part of understanding our charities. I want to put together a couple of questions, and then we're going to start to talk to each other. But these are some questions that I think we need to be asking about when it comes to our consumer power. Do we want to avoid companies or products that we don't support? Or do we want to put our money where we think that the ethical choice is? So if two things are equal, it's an easy choice. If two things aren't equal, so it costs a little bit more to make the ethical choice versus supporting the company we might not like to get the thing, but it's at a cheaper price. How do we make that choice for us? And again, these are ethics, so there isn't a right or a wrong decision. There are more and less ethical decisions. But sometimes your family's money is really important. Keeping a roof over your head is really important. Sometimes we are forced into choice. Often these choices are false, I think. And so we'll talk about those later, these times when we have to make those choices. When we look at the company behind what we're doing, do we want to choose an ethical product, or do we want to look at the company that's behind it? And I bring Fair Trade Certified as one of the organizations that we all have great respect for. I think here you see it on your packaging. When you see something is Fair Trade Certified, that they've done some due diligence to understand where it comes from and what its impact is in the world. But it's just that product. Maybe other products that that company sells might not be fair trade certified. Maybe they are getting their money from other sources and using this as a way to bring people in. Sometimes we have to dig way deeper into the company behind our products rather than looking just at the labels. The local and global conversation, I think, is a really interesting one too. Of course, and Juliana, you were saying it before, we can buy easily from Amazon, or we can walk to Cliffs, which if you live in San Francisco, you might know that Cliffs is a Castro-based everything store. It's a hardware store, but they also sell feather boas and other things that you might need. You can get everything at Cliffs Variety. So that's a local business. And Juliana was talking earlier about making a choice about buying something from Amazon or buying something from a local business. It's great. We want to support local businesses, but maybe we also feel sometimes that we have a duty to support up and coming businesses in the global South or in social enterprise. And I bet Fabienne has some things to say about this when we come into our conversations. She talks a lot about this in her work in SOCAP. Do we need these things to be in tension? Do we have to have tension between any of these either or choices that I've suggested? Or are those tensions made up? Are we just sort of creating tension where it doesn't need to be, which is to say, sometimes it's the right thing to do just to make that purchase or make that choice. And we think broader in other terms to compensate for that. I want to ask a couple more questions about our consumer power. And one of them is about companies that we disagree with and what to do with them. So should we avoid them? Which is to say, boycotting them. There are certain politics associated with boycotting that can be really powerful, that can really help a company understand or be aware of its impact and perhaps change its course. Or do we engage them in conversation? Do we try to support them so that they make better choices or coming around to thinking about it? Boycotts also have down the line problems associated with perhaps low wage workers who have nothing to do whatsoever with the politics of the company, who end up getting laid off or suffering consequences for the boycott that we're doing. So sometimes it's not a win for everyone when we boycott something that we don't agree with. We need to keep all of those things in mind. Where are we doing the most good? Where are we doing the most harm when it comes to avoiding or engaging companies we disagree with? And then finally, what about consumerism and our politics? When we buy ethically, because of the impact it has, we don't want to be complicit in the immorality or the harm that something is doing. So we need to really put our politics, I would say, into our consumerism, into our thinking, and imagine what all of the implications are. So I've heard it said that shopping is more important than voting in our economy. I'm not quite sure I believe that, but what that says to me is, and we say it often, we're going to vote with our dollars, right? When we make choices, we shift or affirm the values of the companies that support those values. When we make choices about that, we can move the needle, sometimes very slowly. Sometimes it doesn't feel like we're moving it at all, but our choices and our politics do have impact. Finally, let's talk a little bit about how we know what we don't know. One of them is research. And I say this right up front. In today's marketplace, buyer beware. We have to know what's out there. We have a lot of options, but we also have more tools to learn about the truth than we've ever had. There are great websites, and I have a list of links at the end of this session where we can go to get information on socially responsible investing, on consumption, on sustainability, on where our food comes from, things like that. So we need to research our products before we make choices. And that's a hard thing to imagine. You're going down the aisle in a supermarket, or you have a list of things that you need, new shoes for the kids, and new storage boxes for our garage or whatever, right? It's just your Saturday shopping list, and you're trying to get things done. And who has time to do the research? And what does research imply? And when we don't do the research, we risk making mistakes or supporting something that might not match our values, or putting our dollars towards something that maybe we wish we hadn't. I think another way that we come to know what we don't know is by listening to each other. Really deeply listening to the stories of vulnerability and the stories of family and how we raise our family or how we make our choices, engaging each other in conversation. Even with the small number of people who are on this call tonight, I bet we have different opinions about these issues and how we think them through and how we come to our choices. And part of the beauty of being Episcopalians is that we are the Anglican communion is something born out of conflict and solving conflict, right? From our very roots, trying to get a divorce and negotiate a hostile relationship between Protestants and Catholics, and literally trying to figure out how to stop killing each other. We devised old tools for resolving conflict through dialogue, through understanding each other, through listening. And these things born out of that crucible are a part of what make us full humans in our faith, that we can deeply engage each other and listen. And that's really important. Develop empathy, hear each other's vulnerabilities, learn from our struggles. And finally, in order to listen, we also have to share. Sharing the stories of how we make our decisions about where we invest, or how we purchase, how we save our money, how we make our charitable donations. When we share those stories in community, we then help others develop their talking points and their ethical values and their action plan for how they'll enact the gospel in their spending, saving, and giving. And I think that those last three slides, doing the research, listening deeply and carefully, and becoming vulnerable and sharing our stories, are the things that faith brings to the conversation about ethics and marketplace. Because we can really do this work in community, in small groups like this one, and others that ripple across the churches, our churches. We can do this work because we have the facility to love and care for each other. So our work, in addition to reacting and telling your own stories about what I've said tonight, I hope we can also answer a couple of these questions, like talking about times that we've made a purchase and we knew that it had some sort of negative impact on the world. I mean, I'd say we do this every time we fill up our cars with gas. But like, how do we make that choice? How do we make that choice okay? Describe some of that, and let's talk about that. And then maybe talk about a time where you made the difficult choice to invest or save or purchase in order to avoid doing harm to our world. And what was that like? Did it cost more money? Did it make you feel better? Did it, like, how do those choices get made as we think this through and as we work together in this as people of faith? I want to stop talking and I want to invite you into the conversation. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can all see each other again. And talk a little bit about your stories about ethical consumerism and choice making. And welcome, Jim. Good to see you.
Took a while. I inadvertently deleted the link, and my lovely wife showed me how to find it again. So,
well, your wife is lovely for many reasons, and we're grateful.
That is true. That is very true. Meg would know that.
Welcome back. We are Holy Innocents is still winning over St. James Fremont tonight, because normally St. James Fremont dominates this conversation, and tonight Holy Innocents is winning. I just want to point that out. But thank you, Jim, for making it a little more even. So who'd like to start? Either a story about how you make ethical decisions, or a time when it was difficult and you made a choice, or a time when you made a choice and you felt kind of gross about it. Like, what are some of your stories? Let's engage the deep sharing and or the holy sharing and the deep listening.
I've got a real obvious one for
Here,
myself.
Meg.
Let's see, July 5th, 2016, my husband and I went.
Remember the day.
It was the day after the 4th of July, because we went to a really big barbecue, and the next day we went vegan. And we haven't, I mean, I can't say we're not perfect at it, because I'm from Wisconsin and I like my cheese and ice cream, which I typically only have when we are back in Wisconsin on vacation or something. So, but here in California, we don't, and I don't see going back. We did it initially out of, let's see, part of it was just dietary. We just wanted to put less of an impact on the world, but then the more we learned about it, it turned into more of an ethical decision. And I can't see going back, honest to gosh. I mean, I can't imagine. Every once in a while we'll have to watch or we'll read something to kind of renew our dedication to it, but it hasn't been hard, honestly. And I feel really good about that. I don't feel so great when I go back to Wisconsin and I eat my frozen custard and my cheese, but yeah, that was a really easy decision. And we don't have a soapbox. We don't wag our finger at people. We don't make big demonstrations at the grocery store, but it's amazing to me how easy, it's amazing to me how easy it was and how easy it is once we got our mindset on this is important to us, and not having that impact on the world and creation was a really a big deal for us. And I don't see us going back to that.
Meg, was it did the experience of going to this barbecue turn something new, or was it like, this is our last hurrah, we know we're going vegan, let's
when I said that, it sounded like it was just like a bad scene and we just got turned off, but we had already kind of planned on it. But we had been invited to this big barbecue, and they did a thing where they did like all the meats of the world, and it was amazing. I mean, they had sausages, they had burgers, they had chicken, they had ribs, they had everything you could have, chicken, I mean, everything you could imagine. And it was delicious. But we had already known ahead of time that that we have to wait till after their barbecue's over before we do this. But yeah, we did wait. But like I said, it creeps in now and then. We're not militant about it, but it's a decision that I don't see going back on, and I don't think I can be convinced to think otherwise now that I know more and that we've been doing it for a while now, and and I just encourage people anytime they have an opportunity to go, even a meal at a time, if they can make a decision at a meal to make a different decision other than meat, then I'll encourage that. But we certainly don't wave our flags and stomp our feet and make a scene. But we do our best to encourage others to do that too. So I don't know if that answered the question or the point we were trying to make or not, but
Yes,
Certainly.
yes.
Yeah, our food is one of the most difficult of our systems to extract ourselves from, especially those of us who are omnivores. It's riddled with all kinds of ethical problems that as a society, and you're right, it's not just the cost to the world, but the life of the animals and the use of our land and water and everything. So
Mhm.
it's completely an ethical, values driven choice. And it's a big one.
Mhm,
What are some of the ways that, I mean, other than your diet,
mhm.
but like, how has it changed your life being a vegan? Like, what's that like? What are you more aware of? Like,
Hmm. Um, I mean, as someone who's always had issues with food in general, I spend a lot of time, I still spend a lot of time thinking about it because it's not as easy as just, it's time for dinner and we don't have anything planned. Let's just run down to the fast food place and grab something. So I wish I still didn't wish I didn't have to think about food as much as I do, but I don't know. I mean, I think about the people whose jobs depend on all kinds of food, even the plant-based versus the meats and animals and stuff. I mean, I feel good about the decision that we did to do that. And I don't know, I wish there was an easier way for everybody to just do it easier and to make a bigger world shift to it, but I get that there's a lot of people for whom it can't be done. I mean, there's communities around the world where that's their livelihood and stuff. So I don't know. I mean,
were you at Diocesan Convention a few years ago when we had the meat resolution?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it was a fascinating conversation to have in the middle of a church business meeting where mostly we're talking about money.
Yeah.
To have this resolution asking churches to be really conscious about how much meat they serve at potlucks, where
Mhm.
that comes from,
And where it comes from.
where
Mhm.
it comes from, and then the other decisions, the other side of that conversation about, you know, we have poor families and they have traditions of what cuts of meat they use,
Right.
and they're not from sustainably raised animals,
Mhm.
and this is how families have to eat sometimes. And it was the most amazing conversation to have at Diocesan Convention.
Mhm.
We ended up.
I don't know, how many of you are aware that the Episcopal Church has a list of companies to not invest in?
Hmm.
I don't even think I was aware of that. Jim, where do we find this magic list?
It's actually on their website. If I can find it again, I'll send it to you. Basically, I learned about this when I was on council, but they have a list of companies who do business. It's not so much they're unethical, but a lot of them are petroleum based. One of the companies provides surveillance materials for Israel to surveil Palestinians. He's like, and that was like, no. And so there's this list of companies that the church has basically said, we're not investing in these. And they have a lot of money to invest, so they might as well not invest in the companies that are doing unethical things. So I took the list, sent it to my broker and said, you could do whatever you like with my money, but don't, but don't spend any of it on these companies. And he said, will do. It's just a matter of, and if you get to it, I'll have to do a little deep dive into it, and I'll send it to you, Davey. But it's there. I can't remember. It's
Juliana just found it and popped it in the link. Thanks, Juliana.
companies to, and they adjust it on a regular basis.
Right. You know, the conversation about investing is, as I'm hearing this, and I'm so glad Fabienne's on this call because she works for an organization that is all about social enterprise and trying to change the conversation about investing. Fabienne, I wonder what you have to say about doing well by doing good.
Well, I mean, I don't know much about investment, so I cannot talk very much about that, but I thought about this. I mean, our vicar, Rosalie, our former vicar, Rosalie, when she first introduced the idea to us, said that it's better to spend a little more to give somebody the dignity of work rather than give to a food bank. So it's better to pay your, if somebody is cleaning for you, or if you buy clothes, it's better to pay more so that people have a job that pays them well rather than give to a, and give makes you feel better, but it's not always the better choice. And so I'm always trying to have that as a beacon. Think about what makes, it's better for me to pay a housekeeper more per hour, even if people tell me that I could get it for a lot cheaper, rather than her having to go to the food bank. I mean, it's much better for her to have the money in our bank account than have to go stand in line at the food bank. And I have nothing against food bank. I think they're wonderful organizations. So, and there are so many facets to that. I mean, the way to approach it, you can approach it for food, you can approach it for your plastic consumption, you can approach it for so many angles, and there's no wrong choice. It's just to do it one little bit at a time, and also not feel guilty when you slip. I mean, we do order at Amazon, and sometimes I just look at it and say, if I go and try to get that product that I want, if I have to drive an hour to go get it, it's not worth it. I'm better off having Amazon send it to me. Now, if it's a nice walk to Cliffs, yeah, that's a good, gets a dog out. So there's a lot of way to, my thinking is that as a consumer, I'd like to think about it once, have a list of company I'm gonna buy from, like, shampoo or things like that. I look through them. I know who I am gonna buy it from, and then I don't think about it again. Otherwise, you spend so much energy trying to make small decisions that it's not worth it. So that's my, but I think a little bit at the time is important, but you cannot go down the aisle and ask yourself. I mean, at some point you're going to grab something, you're going to be hungry, and you're going to want to have dinner on the table, and you're just going to buy something, and you might, after you're full, you might say, "Oh my goodness, I shouldn't have bought that." Well, that happens, and we have to forgive ourselves. And there are good companies that do great things with milk now. And, I come from, I was laughing because I come from a place in the Alps where animals are really important in keeping the mountain clean. and preventing avalanches. So if having those milk producers is a way to keeping the mountain healthy and keeping people involved in the mountain. So that cheese is really important to
Yeah,
the
it's a hard
communities.
balance, yeah.
So it's a very hard balance.
Yeah.
And, you know, so and it has the, so it's what feels good. I mean, you know, I think that's and I saw that you were talking about Tom's shoes and that's also when you're gonna have to look at companies and what they do, and sometimes good intentions do not translate into good practices. And one of the issues with Tom Shoes is that they give shoes to in communities where in Africa, where cobblers then don't and shoe sellers then go out of business, and it's not helping the economy. And so, if they were giving them in America, where they actually sell the shoes, that probably would be a good thing because those kids wouldn't be able to buy the shoes. But in Africa, it is a problem. So maybe you're better off giving, money to a company that gives it to the SPCA and help animals, and so it's always there's so many decisions to make, and so
Yeah.
I'll stop here.
The buy one, give one phenomena of the last sort of decade, Tom Shoes being one of them, there are other companies. It sounds so great, right? And then we have to ask ourselves, is this just messaging? Does it just sound good, or is it good? And on the surface, buy a pair of shoes and somebody who needs shoes gets a pair. Sounds like a great idea, except when you then look at, this village in Africa that had a little shoe business ecosystem going on no longer can give money to this family. And now that family is out of work, but everybody has new shoes. So was it good? And this is, those questions are hard to get answers to. And we don't always learn about them until somebody exposes them. Somebody does that in-depth journalism piece. This is why really paying attention to the media is important. Reading reviews and looking at stories and finding a diverse news source is so important to us. That gets beyond headlines and into really teaching us about these products and tools. And the internet, of course, is great for that. Although you can get as many wrong answers and conspiracies as you can get by Googling right answers. But that's just a beautiful example, Fabienne, of how we need to go deeper and look at it. Your conversation about cows and alpine cows. Everybody wants to support alpine cows, don't they? But
There's also
there's
also the politics of certain organizations. I have my wife and I have a really hard time going to Hobby Lobby because of their politics, but they're also the only place we can get things. So we go at a very minimum. It's not like something we like to go to. We don't buy Barilla pasta. We don't go to Chick-fil-A. I love Chick-fil-A until I read about their attitude about the LGBTQ population. And so you can make consumer choices. I'm sure it doesn't hurt Barilla's bottom line that I don't buy their pasta or their sauces, but it's a conscious decision on our part to say, nope, not that.
Yeah, but you also have, that's also the part where you also have to renew it on a regular basis. because I think that Barilla actually has changed the management, and they are actually probably sort of okay, but that
Yeah, they have at least outwardly.
Yeah. It's not.
Their politics and their advertising of, we created a diversity group, and the CEO sort of apologized for his comments. It's taken them over 5 years to recover from that. And then there's Chick-fil-A, who's unapologetic.
Yeah, but there's also, I remember a few years ago, a lot of people boycotted the SodaStreams, and because they were an Israeli company, and SodaStream actually, under pressure from the EU, had plant in the Palestinian territories. So if you were boycotting them, you were actually taking work away from Palestinians. So there's so much to figure out.
Right. Multinational companies are the big issue, since we don't know where you're going to be going or who you're going to be affecting. Deirdre has something to say. There's a hand up.
Yeah, so I wanted to just take it off in a different direction, which is about transportation.
Okay.
And so my personal story was kind of, when did I feel I made a bad choice, and when did I try to make a good choice? I remember going on a trip with my family. We went to Europe. It's the only time we've ever gone there. And but just flying in a huge plane, over the Atlantic you really feel like, oh my gosh, I'm just like sucking up all this fuel. And it was worth it, but I was very, very conscious of making that choice. And then on the flip side, I took a trip for work. So I work for the US EPA, and I took a trip down Southern California, and I had to be there at a specific time, but I didn't have anything pressing on the return. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to fly back. I'm going to take a different form of transportation. So I decided I was going to take the train from San Diego to the Bay Area. And what I ended up doing was taking the train, Amtrak, to Santa Barbara, and then switching to a bus, because that was the option. And so I left San Diego in the middle of the afternoon. I got to Santa Barbara at about 11 at night, and then the bus took me to Emeryville, and I got there at dawn. So it was a long trip, and it was the thing about the bus is that it was cold, and it was very uncomfortable. And I hate to say that because I don't want to sound fussy, but it's like when you don't know anyone around you and you hear people and you're just like sitting there wide awake at 3 a.m, you're feeling, okay, why am I doing this? But I'm glad I did it, because I'm glad that I had the experience of just trying something that was about avoiding what I perceived to be a higher emissions form of transportation. And I had to push my workplace to let me do it, because they're like, well, why should we let you do this? Because you're taking more hours. It's more expensive for us to, give you extra time to travel. And I'm like, we are the EPA. It's like, why are we doing the work that we do if we don't promote the opportunity to try something that is not so fuel intensive? So
well, yeah, and diesel trains are.
Well, let me just finish. Okay, let me just finish. Sorry. So why are we doing this if we're not kind of going to evaluate our choices more carefully? And I would definitely do it again, but I think maybe I would do a closer calculation of what exactly am I saving, and I would also be a more aware consumer of like, well, exactly how long does it take to get from point A to point B. I'm fine if it takes a long time, but if it's just super uncomfortable, it feels like, oh, did I make the right choice? But it was as a learning experience, it was great, and I'm glad I did it.
Another thing to check next time you want to do that is to make sure that the entire route's open. they obviously had some track issues that caused the buses to show up. I've taken that trip from LA to Emeryville on train, and it's a wonderful trip along the coast. But it was train all the way from downtown Los Angeles to downtown Emeryville.
So, but that point, I love that you tried something different, and that experience was something to it was conscious. It also provided your coworkers with a little value lesson, something to talk about, something to think about, and engaged a conversation about it, which is, I think, really one of the important things that we do when we do this work. We, in our own action, like Barilla Pasta or like choosing the train, it causes conversation to have. Maybe that conversation is small, maybe it's national, maybe it's global, but that dialogue is what ends up changing hearts and minds overall. It's sometimes glacially paced, but those conversations are what change us. And that's really important in this too, Deirdre. And I really applaud you for going on that long journey. I don't know that I would do that. I might try to find that hidden button on United that says you'll plant how many trees if I give you $25 more, and hope that offsets my jet fuel, but probably doesn't. But
That's also an option that you have when you well off
right.
to get your guilt off by planting 25 trees. And the people who are poorer don't have that option, and they have to take the bus that's cold. So it's a very good experience, if for nothing else, to see how people we don't have a choice have to travel.
Well, and then you think that if people that do have the means to not take the bus do take the bus or the train, it increases the demand, and then maybe conditions will improve so that it's not such a, I don't want to say horrible, but it's not such a daunting experience, and you're not having to worry about your safety and your comfort so much.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Go on.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I couldn't hear through my headphones. That idea of sort of alleviating guilt when we have the money to do it. When we are choosing to pay more for something or choosing to do something like that, we have started to talk about it more as an obligation because we can. So I am not concerned about pesticides in the produce that my kids eat. I don't buy organic produce because I think it's really going to impact them that much, but I think it's better for the environment and it's better for the people who are working on farms if produce is grown organically. But I can also afford to buy those strawberries or make more choices around it, or buy them sometimes and buy other things, so that those choices are, well, I can, and not everyone can. Some people just need to buy the conventionally grown produce, meats, dairies, and instead of saying I'm feeling less guilty, saying that this is my obligation to do these things, because not everyone has the option.
Go on, Jim.
I like the notion that it's not so much the pesticides and the things that might be end up in the food, but the fact is that it's safer for the farm workers to be working with organic product. And I like that idea. I really do. It wasn't one of the things that came up in my brain when I think of organic farming, but you're right. It really does protect the farm workers.
So why is all of this conversation that we're having about money and choices, why is this something that is related to our church, related to our stewardship, related to how we encounter our community? Um, why isn't this a political conversation? Why is this a faith conversation that we're having? How does our money and our faith relate? How do our money and our faith relate?
Well, our churches make the same kinds of decisions families do. We do in fact buy product. We are consumers. And to the extent that we as a church can make ethical decisions about what we consume and how we consume it. You know, make it our own vestry. We kind of know where our money's being spent.
So at your coffee hour, no one does a Costco run to?
No, it's
Costco's okay. They pay their employees well, and
They
give
do.
them
exactly.
healthcare.
They do.
So
They do.
Costco's okay.
I've actually got no problem shopping at Costco. I do have a problem shopping at other places, but and again, as you were saying, shop locally if you can, and sometimes it's the only place you can get the product you were looking for is on Amazon.
Yeah.
And I'd rather not do that, but it ends up that's the only place I can get it.
Yeah. And I was thinking, when you speak about stewardship, I was thinking about what you said about nonprofits and salaries and overhead. And I was, I have a personal beef about that, because I think nonprofits should pay their employees well. I mean, if they pay their CEO a lot of money, I mean, that's probably wrong. But if they don't pay their lowest employee right, this is wrong.
Mhm.
We as a church have employees, and we need, I mean, this is a struggle at Holy Innocent to first pay we had to pay our priest the 100%, and then now we're trying to start to pay a little more to compensate for the fact that they are to live in San Francisco and it's expensive, and it's difficult as a nonprofit to get that. And it's easy for us to think about it because we're thinking about in terms of somebody we love, that one employee, that 2 or 3 employees we have are people we truly love and cherish. And so thinking that they need a living wage and they shouldn't work for peanuts is an easy thing to process. But a lot of employees in nonprofits are not paid enough. And I've heard a lot of people who work for homeless shelter or help people find housing who themselves cannot afford those housings that they're trying to find. And that's wrong.
Yeah.
And so I would say I mean, and it's difficult to actually gauge, but I would not give to a charity that does not pay their lowest employees well. That's, yeah, I mean, let's put it this way, there should be the difference between the highest pay and lowest paid employees should be reasonable.
I think though that's,
yeah, go ahead.
I think that's why this is a conversation for church, because that's what we are called to do. We are called to be stewards of the environment, and we are called to be looking out for other people in our community. And part of the way we can do that is considering how we use products, how they affect the environment, how our products are affecting the people who make them. Are they paid well? The services we use. And I think having this conversation in the context of our faith is important because it's not it's what we are supposed to be doing as if it's extra incentive to be doing it because this is what we are asked to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think the beauty of doing it as a group of people of faith is that we can rely on each other. For instance, we all have done our research on one product or group of product, and we can actually, if somebody tells me that they've done their research on that kind of, which company is better at X, then I don't have to do it again.
Yeah, that's a great point, that as a church, as a community, we all have different experiences in the marketplace. And if we bring those experiences back into conversations like this, we don't each of us have to do our own research all the time. We can rely on how our friends and neighbors at church have encountered these products or made choices. And we should, we don't always like to talk about money in church, but we should engage this topic more, with the people that we share pews with and the people we see at coffee hour. When we learn about a product, we should say, hey, this is what I've learned. And when we're trying to find a socially responsible investment, we should ask around at church, who knows about this, or where are you putting your money, or how are you making these decisions? Our churches have some of this information and can be great places to share this body of knowledge as well. So I think you make a
Yeah.
really good point, Fabienne.
Just at the beginning of the pandemic, Jane and I, our vicar Jane and I, were looking at beauty products, and we were exchanging shampoo samples and things like that. And we had a huge, and then the pandemic came and we had to stop cold turkey. But we started on that. And so we were changing toothpaste against laundry strips and things like that. So it was funny. But church is a good place to do that.
Are there other experiences that you've had in the marketplace where you've used your values to make decisions, or where you've had to make difficult compromises that you want to share? Anything else to add to this conversation?
You had a
Something
slide, I'm sorry.
Sorry, something that I feel guilty about, but that I continue to practice is that I spend so little on myself. I'm always spending it on my children, friends, whatever. And it takes so much for me to spend something on myself, partly because if I really want something, I want it to be something that lasts. I don't want to be something that's just like cheap or, something that's just going to wear out. And so I want to buy something that I like. But yet when I do that, I feel like, wow, I just spent $65 on a blouse, like, what did I do that for? Well, I buy one blouse a year. It's like,
Right.
maybe not such a dumb thing, but it does kind of push your buttons when you decide I have to have quality. But then it's like, well, what is my money not going for if I'm
Mhm.
indulging myself in a $65 shirt?
I think that consumerism versus other political choice making or whatever is really important. You could have 3 blouses that might be, that might disintegrate after the 4th washing and have involved horrible policies from their creation to how they arrived in your home. Or you could have one quality made blouse that you have to wash a lot because you wear it a lot and it lasts you a very long time. And that's a decision. Variety versus quality, choice making all around. And I think that I have some relatives who do all of their shopping at farmers markets and local craft fairs. Their dishes are pottery. So, you know, they can't, when they break a glass, they just can't run off to the store and buy another one. You know, they have to source it and figure it out. And they live very, I will say simply, but they live very well, right? I mean, their food is great. Their dishes are beautiful. Their clothes are handmade by them or others. And this is a way of living that doesn't always work for us in our post-industrial revolution work environment, family, in our economy. But this is also, these are choices that we can make. I feel great when I go to the farmer's market and buy my week's worth of groceries, even though my bank account feels less great. But it makes a difference, right? I love the quality of what I have in my kitchen. It looks beautiful when I open up those bags and see all the produce. And it's a decision, right? So I've maybe bought less than I would buy if I went to my local chain grocery store, because I had to make some choices about how much of my budget did I want to put into this. So I think these choices are really important ones. And that if we really think about how many blouses do we need, or how much produce do we need, or how many dishes do we need in our cabinet, you know, we need the one that's on us and one in a closet. We need one glass to drink out of and one to keep clean. I don't know. It's like, how much do we really need? And this is a hard question to think about. Meg, you talked earlier about your, you know, teaching your mom about these values. And, you know, I'm having these conversations with my 78-year-old parents too, like why Walmart is a bad idea. And it's
The
hard,
one, that's the one that I deal
right?
with.
And it's hard.
Yeah.
They're on fixed income, and inflation in Michigan is nuts.
And it's really convenient, and she
It's
can get her
convenient. They can-
prescriptions and her
Right.
glasses and everything she needs right there. And
When I go home and I see all the Walmart stuff in my family's house, I'm like, and I'm like, you made, you know, the dollars you saved were really important dollars to you.
yeah, and I when I was back there a couple weeks ago with her, I went to go pick up her prescription for her, and there were more people of color working there than I remember ever seeing in that community. She lives in a very white, middle class part of Wisconsin, and I was torn because I saw a lot of people. I saw people who appeared to me to be from India and working there, and I'm like, oh, that's great. But then I'm thinking, why are they working at Walmart? Why can't they be doing something? I was having such a battle in my head that it was so great to see diversity finally in that part of my travels there, but yet it was at Walmart. Like baby steps. I think that's all I could kind of take it as. Like, I'm glad they're there, and I hope that they can move on from Walmart.
Yeah,
I-
and I go ahead.
My uncle, 103, but he and my father lived in a small village, and they did used to ever step foot in that store. So Dad, when go shopping, he would go to Walmart, and then he would go to the store to get his brother's stuff, which had to be organic. It had to be basically, he was getting lobster that was actually caught in Maine, or salmon that was caught in Maine, or whatever. But my Uncle Bill was like, this is, he was eating organic before organic was a thing. But it's interesting to see basically different people's.
Oh, we lost Jim. He was fading out, in and out anyway. Sorry.
I thought it was my machine too, because I have wonky internet sometimes. There
Welcome
you go.
back. You're muted now, I think.
I've said enough.
Okay. Well, we got the point. Thank you. Fabienne, you were gonna say something.
Well, I was going to say that, Walmart may not be, we cannot say that Walmart is evil or what,
Right.
but we can totally try to get them to pay their employees better. And if they start providing good jobs for their employees, if Amazon pays their employees well, then it may not be as, there are progress to be made. It's all incremental. And we cannot go back to, we cannot all live the simple life. We cannot impose it on everybody. But we can, as consumers, start saying, it's very nice that Walmart is bringing cheaper products, but can we engage you in paying your employees more, in providing careers rather than, I don't know, and it's very difficult to do because we're faced with big companies and the profit is important. But I think we're at this point where image is important also for them, and that's where they might have to compromise and pay their employees better if they want to keep their part of the market.
Yep. I think in as much as we as consumers can push companies to pay fair wages and advocate for their workers' benefits and all of this, the better. We do that with the choices that we make. We do it with the ways that we vote and the ways that we advocate. And you've brought it up a couple of times this evening, Fabienne, and I think it's so important. The workers at companies are the ones that often need the most protection, and we need to advocate for them and use our dollars to get the best deal we can for the workers. So I really appreciate that, and I appreciate all of the conversation we've had this evening. We are coming up on 8 o'clock, and I know we could all go longer on this. But I will share just a couple more slides to close us out, and then and wish us good night. I want to, let's see, here we go. So I said I'd share some links about websites you can go to that help us make choices. You'll get these slides. They will be posted on the Diocesan website tomorrow, and I will email you all out with a link to this video and also the slide deck so that you have them. But here are some great websites that I use to do some of that research before I make decisions about products, services, or things that I might like to think about. Deirdre, I think I might need to include something on ethical travel after your point. And I think that would be a really good place to go. And I didn't know that you worked for the EPA. In October, we have a whole session on environmentalism and stewardship. I might be calling on you. So beware. So here's a great place that I use, and I'm sure we could all add to these as well. Our next session is Thursday, the 28th of April. We're going to be sharing some stories of resurrection, how our stewardship, how our investment in our churches can unlock new potential, new ministry, new ideas, new life for our communities, and some stories from around our diocese, and some stories that we might have to share about how we made great choices in our churches, and have some stories of resurrection to share, as we will officially be in Eastertide by then. I thank you so much for joining this session. As I said, this is recorded. You've all been participating in this. Thank you. I will send out the video and the slides as they are loaded up onto the website later. I really appreciate this. And even though we were a small group, we were mighty. I love the conversation we had tonight. So thank you. We'll
Thanks,
see you
everybody.
next
Thank
time.
you, Davey.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
Everyone.
Great.
Bye.
Thank you.